And we are finally back to finish off last week's great episode. Just stay tuned until after the music. You're about to listen to a great episode of the Lazenby Experience podcast. Within this episode, my hope is that you obtain something that will help you find your success. So grab a pen, get your paper, your favorite snack or drink, and really listen to what I have to say. I truly believe it can be what you need to get you to your next level in life. So grab a seat and enjoy the ride, and I'll see you on the other side. Welcome back to another episode of the Lazenby Experience podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. We are here to finish off what we started last week with the episode on overcoming obstacles and succeeding through adversity with my very special guest, one of the 7 founders of NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers, George Smith. Now, if you haven't already, I will highly recommend that you go back and listen to last week's episode before you go on to listen to this episode. If you haven't done so, it's going to make a lot more sense if you do that. But if you have listened to last week's episode and you're ready to get back into what we were talking about, we're here. We're here. I'm ready for you to listen. So again, thank you for listening to this episode, and we're going right back into what we finished off last week.
Art Bond is an 18-year-old young man coming in, and he was enrolled in the very first Purdue University honors engineering class. So, he wasn't coming in, with underdeveloped skill set. They recognized that he was one of the brightest young men, brightest students, period, in the engineering school. But he faced obstacles that, almost unimaginable compared to the environment that we had to go through in the 1970s. And, one of his obstacles was a physical obstacle. He was a strong, to me, he looked like Jim Brown or somebody, he was a strong man. He didn't look like what you think an engineer would look like, mm-hmm. Right? So he was participating in sports. He was playing baseball, and over the course of the game, he had already hit 2 home runs, and the pitcher had enough of it. So the pitcher threw at him, and he hit him in the head, and he knocked him out. Not only did he knock him out of the game, he knocked him out of Purdue. He knocked him out of engineering school. He knocked him out of college. He had a concussion, major concussion, that he had to recover from. So he had to leave school to do that. And after he left school, life happened, right? So started in 1957, getting knocked out in 1959, and he didn't return until 1966. So life happened in those 7 years. So what is life? Got married. Before that, he went to the Army. He had to get a job, right? So he worked. He was able to leverage his Signal Corps training in the military into a technician job in working for a company called, what was the name of that company? I can't remember the name of that company right now. But he had an opportunity to work as a research technician. And in that role, he had an opportunity to work on the first solid state laser. And he actually invented, he told me, the first application for the solid state laser. Who knew, right? Because he was a technician, the engineers got credit for all that. But it was a major breakthrough. I actually looked up a book called The History of Electronics. You might be interested in that book too. But in that book, I found that they, said there were a couple of major breakthroughs in the history of the laser, and one of them happened in Indiana for this company. Again, I apologize for not being able to remember the name of the company. And it happened during that same period of time that Art Bond said he was there. Okay. And this book, I'm telling you, this book was written after that conversation that I had with Art Bond. He didn't read, something and then find out about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe him that he was instrumental in developing the first applications for and developing a better manufacturing process that enabled a more powerful laser to be built and used. So Art Bond had to, have that experience, and all that put together. He found a way to get back to Purdue University as a married student and continue on with his goal to achieve his degree in electrical engineering. So think about that for obstacles overcome.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And I mentioned earlier, you have to dig deep. You have to dig deep and build some solid roots for you to have a foundation for a big career tree to emerge for your life. And he was an expert at that, and he was this role model, that had, achieved these things that, listen, I can go on my LinkedIn page right now and I can identify probably 150 PhDs, STEM PhDs. Just within moments, I can do a search on my LinkedIn like that. You couldn't do that in the 1970s.
Mm-hmm.
So that just gives you an idea of, what a rare individual he was. And, this outgrowth of success. There's so many people that have, that owe much to him, and they don't even realize that he exists. They know that they stand on shoulders, and, because the Chicago Six is so visible, many people, give us accolades for standing on our shoulders, but rest assured that we, the Chicago Six, we stand on some heavy shoulders too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're not at the bottom of the pyramid. There are people, on whose shoulders that we stand, and it's part of my mission with this NSBE History project that I'm working on to not only reveal, the influence of Art Bond, but also some of these other pioneers, that followed him in between Art Bond and the Chicago Six. They are really important people as well.
Yeah, I enjoy hearing whenever we have this conversation about Arthur Bond or NSBE in general. Like, I don't know, I love origin stories, and I feel like this is like one of the greatest origin stories. Well, I might be biased, but because I'm a part of the organization and it's done so much for me. But I definitely enjoy whenever I get a chance to listen to and like kind of relive, or I guess not relive, but like hear the stories of Arthur Bond and the people who helped start NSBE. And I feel like this episode is going to be like a two-parter because there's still some other questions I want to get to before we end this episode. And so if you couldn't tell by the title of this episode, the other part is succeeding through adversity. And I want to try to get into that as well. So what does adversity mean, and why is it important for us to understand and where it comes from?
Adversity. Adversity and obstacles, they're sort of one and the same. And an adverse environment is the environment that existed at Purdue University before Art Bond, came and you know, and influenced it and improved it. An adverse environment can exist in the workplace as well for people who are considered outsiders to a certain extent. But I also mentioned in the very beginning, Joshua, that the obstacles can be external, they can also be internal. And quite frankly, I think the internal obstacles are greater than the external obstacles. You know, and as a bit of evidence of that, you know, we have people that succeeded at the highest levels long before the civil rights movement. You know, 100 years before the civil rights movement, 40 years before the Civil War, there was a black man who was a very successful tailor in New York City, and he was a homegrown, self-made chemist. He invented the dry cleaning process, and he was recognized by the National Inventors Hall of Fame as one of the greatest inventors of all time, and he achieved that 40 years before the Civil War. So, you know, that was a time when the obstacles were maximum, and nevertheless, there was something about that man that enabled him to achieve success. Okay, so my strong belief, let's just put it that way, is that the power of your personal willpower and personal fortitude is greater than any external power that there is that's creating, an adverse environment for people. And those stories of success in the 1800s, black inventor success stories, they just continue on. We've been a part of we've been a part of most of the major advances in technology in the history, not just of the United States, but in the history of the world. Now, I had an opportunity to sit next to a wise gentleman. Now, I'm 69 years old, so most people your age, they look at me as the OG, right? But there was a man that I met who was in his latter 80s when I met him. That was several years ago. But he had an opportunity to be mentored by my black inventor role model. My Black Panther black inventor, okay? And this gentleman's name was David Crosthwaite. And when David Crosthwaite graduated from Purdue University with a mechanical engineering degree in 1913, okay? And so he was still around in the 1970s when this fellow was, achieving his mark. He became an engineering professor at Purdue University after David Crosthwaite's career as a mechanical engineer and an engineering manager. He wound up in the same place at Purdue University on their faculty at the same time as this other fellow. And I apologize, I can't remember his name right now, but I had an opportunity to sit next to him, during the 40th anniversary of a 40th celebration of the Minority Engineering Department at Purdue University. And, I started thinking about, when he was telling me about when he was at Purdue as a part of the faculty, and I, just saw, well, was David Crosthwaite, because I knew enough about David Crosthwaite to know that after he retired, he came back to Purdue. So I asked him, were you there? Did you know him? And he said, yes. And I mean, I'm just telling you, shockwaves went through my mind. You know, it might have been enough to re-energize the hair follicles and, you know, make the hair grow, you know, back on my bald head. Okay. When he told me that, so I was like a kid, you know, sitting on Santa's lap asking him, you know, well, what did he tell you? You know, I asked, did he mentor you? Did you ask him questions? You know, how successful was he? You know, what kind of respect did a man like that have on Purdue University's campus? Why didn't anybody tell me about him? All these kind of things. But I said, so what advice did he give you? You know, because obviously he faced obstacles that you never face. And what he told me is that David Crossway said you have to block all the obstacles out. You have to block all that out. You cannot allow that to influence your personal brain waves. Okay? So that takes a willpower and a level of focus that most people will never achieve. Okay? But David Crossway achieved that. And, you know, so I'm very grateful. This is the first time I've, you know, really spoken about what I learned when I was sitting next to this gentleman. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to kind of close the loop on a few questions that I had, you know, and actually shake the hand of someone who had shaken the hand of the guy who I had already decided was my, you know, great, you know, black engineering role model. You know, and about David Crossway, think about his obstacles. 1913, you know, how old was he in 1913? When he graduated after finishing 4 years, he was 15 years old. So that means that at 11 years old, this young man, he was still a boy. You can't call 11-year-old a man, okay? At 11 years old, he was prepared to study engineering at Purdue University. And not only that, he was reputed to be the top engineering student, not top black engineering student, the top engineering student at Purdue University during his period there. By 1920, he had achieved a master's in mechanical engineering from Purdue University. So I don't know anything about that period between 1913 when he got his BS and 1921. I haven't found any information about that period, but what I have found is there's a company. It's called MEPCO. I can't remember, you know, what that acronym stands for. But in the 1920s, it was the C.A. Dunham Company. And, you know, they built machine parts. And so they actually, on their website, even today, they talk about their growth being as a result of the, you know, inventive genius of David Crossway. And in that, they said the turning point for their company was when they contacted Purdue University to try to find and hire their top engineering student. Okay, so that evidence is there and available for anybody to read. Now, there's no picture of David Crossway, so no one will know by looking at their website that the person that they're talking about was a black man. Okay, no picture at all, but the evidence is there. And just to make a long story short about David Crossway, what did he do? He was the top influencer, top definer in the world of the technology for heating and cooling large buildings. he actually wrote the standards, the worldwide international standards for heating and cooling, the heating and cooling industry. And as an example of his influence, in the 1930s, he was commissioned to design the heating and cooling system for Rockefeller Center in New York City and for Radio City Music Hall. This is in the 1930s, okay? This is in engineering. Jackie Robinson was still a child in the 1930s, and so we're talking about breaking barriers like, no one. There should be a movie about David Crosswaite. There should be a movie about David Crosswaite, and there should be a movie about Dr. Arthur Bond, okay? Because these stories are rich with opportunities to answer the question that you're posing. How can we overcome obstacles?
So I feel like this whole episode, we're not just getting a lot of good advice, but we're getting like a good history lesson too. And I think even though I didn't enjoy history in high school, I think I enjoy history in general because it's a lot of information. I don't know, with school is always about like the test or about a quiz or something, but being able to learn it, like just to learn it, I feel like I grasp it a lot more and I understand it and enjoy it a lot more. So this has definitely been something that I've been enjoying, just listening to the stories and to the advice that I'm going to also use for my future as well. But when it comes to adversity, do you think there's like the other side as far as like getting over adversity, and then how does that look?
Well, what it looks like is, I mentioned earlier that business is about people. Everything is about people in the world. You have to build allies. That's how you overcome adversity. An adverse environment is you have to build allies. Art Bond built allies with the faculty at Purdue University. He built allies in corporate America. He built allies with the people on the committees that he supported, the National Academy of Engineering, the Committee on Minorities in Engineering. He built allies, and that's what is going to be required to overcome adversity. Now, we have attempted to build allies in government and hopefully get the laws of the country to reflect the ideals. But whatever it is that you're trying to overcome or achieve, you're not going to be able to do it solo. You have to build allies. And the thing to remember is that they're there, okay? People who, are fair-minded are there. You just have to seek them out. And you just have to have your antenna up to recognize when you encounter someone who is someone who appears to be fair-minded. And the way to build allies is to go out and help someone do something. Okay? This is my philosophy. I never ask anyone to do anything for me unless I have already volunteered to do something for them. Okay? And so you're gonna find, I'm gonna guarantee you that the adverse environment will change if you jump in, volunteer, help to become part of the solution, and become known as a problem solver. Your environment will change for the better.
So when it comes to adversity, are there things that you think you learn that you wouldn't learn otherwise, or learn in like if you didn't go through that adversity?
Well, you have to have experiences. I think back to the probability of me being successful in the technical sales force of Hewlett Packard was not high when I joined it. The expectations for my performance were not high. My personal expectations were of the highest order, but the expectations of the people around me, other than the ones who hired me, I mean, they hired me, so they must have felt like I had a shot at it at least. They knew I was qualified, but those expectations that you have for yourself can overcome any, I'll say almost any obstacle, almost any adverse situation that you face.
So we probably already kind of answered this question, but I thought I should ask anyway, just to see. And when it comes to adversity and overcoming obstacles, it's about your mindset. And what are some things that people can do to kind of shift their mindset to get through those obstacles instead of giving up through those obstacles?
Well, one of the things you need to do is celebrate your victories, and you got to keep in mind that you're going to have small victories before you have large victories. So give yourself credit. Quite often we're raised to be humble, but you need to be able to say to yourself, hey, I did a good job on that. I did a good job on that. And, my work is on a par with anyone and everyone else that's doing this type of work. So that's what I would recommend. Celebrate your victories, and build up your self-esteem by reminding yourself that you have done a good job, and that will give you the confidence to take on more obstacles, to take yourself to whatever it is, the next level, the next goal that you have. And remember that, well, I achieved, in the past, and overcame in the past, and I should be able to overcome in the future.
So as we kind of wind down this episode, I just want to make sure that we get everything that could potentially help someone. So is there maybe anything that you think we may have missed, or anything that you like to expand upon that we discussed when it comes to overcoming obstacles or succeeding through adversity?
Well, I think that your questions were open-ended, and I have been open in my responses. I've covered everything that I can think of right now. Okay. 5 minutes after this interview is over, I'll say, I forgot to tell them about this or that and the other. My belief is that what you're trying to do is to give people sort of a reservoir of ideas to help them help themselves. And, so I applaud that. I think it's a good idea. And the key thing that I want to just reemphasize is that we're not in this alone. Okay. We have peers, we have, there are mentors. And I think, people need to seek, positive influences, and they need to hold up standards of excellence that they aspire to. And as I reflect back on the very beginning of my journey into this, profession of engineering, I'm reminded of my father telling me that electrician has a good job. Go talk to him. Electrician says, "How good are you in math?" I said, "That's my best subject." He says, "You should go to college and major in electrical engineering." And I can think back to the very first assembly in high school where this student was being honored for. He was on stage, and we had a large high school. We had over 2,000 students, so this is a big room. And he was being honored for several reasons. One, he was an all-star basketball player, so he was famous just because of that. It was a highly competitive team in the city of Chicago. But he was not stereotypical because he was a straight A student. And he announced that he was going to Purdue University to major in electrical engineering. It's only the second time in my life that I heard that. Okay. So I didn't know this guy. He was just an icon on the stage. But I'm sitting there, and the other thing is that he received the S emblem. It's a scholarship emblem for getting straight A's 2 years in a row. And, I was sitting next to one of my fellow founders, Brian Harris. I thought I said it to myself, but, 30 years, 40 years after the event, I, recalled it to Brian. He said, "No, I said it out loud." He heard me say it, that, so I'm this impressionable, 5'2" freshman looking at this 6'7" senior basketball player saying, "I'm going to get straight A's 2 years in a row. I'm going to get the S emblem, and I'm going to Purdue to major in electrical engineering." Okay. I never said a word to him. The first word I ever saw to him was when I got to Purdue. I was a freshman. He was a senior, and I introduced him myself. He didn't know. I wasn't on his radar screen. Okay. This guy was like, a superhero compared to me. Right. And, but I had to say something. It was kind of awkward. I just asked him, "What should I do to be successful?" And he looked at me. I had grown, but he's still looking down at me from up at 6'7", right? And he said, "Just go to class and do your homework."
Sometimes it can be just that simple. So last question. I think we learned a lot, not just about what we can do right now, but just about history in general. What is like one or two things that you want to make sure that the listeners take away from this episode if they don't take away anything else?
Well, I would like people to remember that there's no obstacle that can stop you. The obstacle will not stop you. Your mindset, your mental fortitude, that is what will stop you. And when you look at the great achievements that people have made, they're not quick. It sometimes takes a lifetime to achieve great goals. If we just go back to thinking about Albert Einstein and his achievements, the difference between Albert Einstein and the rest of us is not that he was more intelligent. It was that he was willing to work on a problem longer than anybody else. So if he worked on, where you may work on a problem, 9 minutes, 9 hours, 9 days, or even 9 months. Albert Einstein would work on it for 9 years. Okay. so you cannot allow that obstacle to ever stop your effort. Okay? The obstacle can present a barrier, but it cannot stop the effort that you put forward. So that's the thing that I want people to take from this episode.
Well, I agree, and I thank you for taking the time out to be a part of this episode, be a part of my podcast. I've been enjoying it. I enjoyed the whole episode, just listening. I feel like I didn't talk a lot, but I think that's good because I got to listen and learn a lot from your experiences. But before we go, is there anything that you might want to plug or shout out before we end the episode?
Well, you mentioned history, and I always add that to whatever I'm talking about. And because of my role in the founding of NSBE, the history of NSBE's founding is extremely important to me. Okay, to the point of I take it personal when I hear accounts of our history that are not accurate. Okay, and so what I want to plug is that we have a committee that's been established. Some very long-term NSBE-loving people are members of this committee, and our sole purpose is to document, to build an archive of the original documents from the 1970s. NSBE is big enough that there will be many people who will, write accounts of, their view of whatever happened, as a part of the founding. But to this day, we do not have a central location that we can go to and see the newsletters, the resume books, the recruiting brochures,
the photos,
the resume of Dr. Arthur Bond, the letters of recommendation about Art Bond that reveal his contribution. Art Bond also performed a research study. The title, I believe, was the factors associated with attracting and retaining Black Americans in engineering. This was based on 10 years of research. This was published in 1977. It was referenced in the report on retaining minorities in engineering that was published by the National Science Foundation. It was a report of the Committee of Minorities in Engineering. Okay, I want people to understand that information is available. Okay, and it's not subject to interpretation. Okay, our history is documented, but no one knows that it exists.
Mm-hmm.
So I was inspired by a website called archive.gov. I encourage any listener, everyone, most people listening are United States citizens, right? Or they're living in this country. There is a website called archive.gov, and it has the original documents for the United States of America, the Declaration of Independence, the Emancipation Proclamation, the Constitution, the original treaties that the United States established to go from coast to coast, in North America. And so it's all right there. there have been many accounts of the history of the United States, but, at least you have that reference point, not only for people who are writing history, but also for people who are doing fact-checking about our history. When claims are made about what did and didn't happen as a result of the founding of NSBE, that reference should stand for as long as the organization stands, so people can reference it to know what really happened, and and to fact check it against other accounts. I remember being involved in a back and forth on social media. Someone posted a book that stated that NSBE was founded in Atlanta. Okay, no, that's not true. Okay, but people who read that have no real reference point to go back to and say, well, where exactly, did it happen? And not just accounts, but I'm talking about original documentation. So the sole purpose of launching this first effort is to recover as many of the documents that were written in the 1970s as possible. That's the highest priority for this archive that we're building. And after those, documents are available, then we'll start, writing, accounts of, what was in between the lines that, was not there, or, getting founder impressions of what we, viewed our individual experiences were, during that period of time. So, it's necessary. NSBE's been here for 50 years. I don't see the need for NSBE going away anytime in the next 50 years.
Not at all.
We're going to have to achieve parity and beyond before, we reach conditions where we start to think about, how important is this? I am not, I am happy with the success we've achieved, but I don't want anybody to be under any delusions that we're anywhere close to the goal that NSBE has the potential to achieve.
And I agree. And once again, I say thank you for agreeing to do this interview with me. I appreciate it. I know the listeners will appreciate this as well. And again, thank you. And hopefully this can be just hopefully the start of something great. So again, thank you. And for the listeners, thank you for staying. If you're still listening, thank you for continuing listening to this episode. I know there's a lot, but it's a lot of great information. So thank you for listening. And until next time, continue your journey until you reach your success. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of the Lazenby Experience podcast. I really hope you were able to receive valuable information that will help you take actionable steps to get you closer to achieving your goals. If this is true for you, I would really appreciate it if you share this episode with others, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to continue receiving updates on new episodes. I truly am excited about how my experience, the Lazenby Experience, can make a difference in your life. Again, thank you for listening to the Lazenby Experience podcast, and until next time, continue your journey until you reach your success.